AirJoule Technologies, ticker AIRJ, just reported Q2 2026 earnings, and, well, they missed consensus on the bottom line.
Yeah, visited by a fairly wide margin, actually.
Right, so actual earnings per share came in at a loss of 12 cents, and the street was only expecting an 8-cent loss.
Hmm.
And revenue, that printed exactly at $0, which, is perfectly in line for a pre-revenue atmospheric water harvesting company. But the thing that really moved the needle, the big headline, was the forward guidance.
Oh, absolutely. The cash spend target.
Exactly. Management officially raised their full year 2026 cash spend target. They bumped it up from roughly a $25 million to a range of $27 to $28 million.
And they cited a severe acceleration in commercialization activities for that, right?
And the market's reaction was it was violent. I mean, shares plummeted 17.2% in after-hours trading, down to $5.20. Yeah, and they opened the pre-market session down 12%. But then, and this is where it gets crazy, on this massive 176% volume surge, institutional buyers just aggressively stepped in.
They bought the dip.
They bought it hard. The stock staged this massive intraday rebound, clawing back to close the regular session at $6.04. So it was down just 4.43% for the day.
Which basically perfectly frames our mission for you today. Because we were looking at a pre-revenue company that missed its EPS target, they increased their cash burn, and yet
the sophisticated institutional investors stepped in anyway.
Exactly. That kind of price action tells you there's, a much deeper structural story playing out beneath those headline numbers. So we're going to unpack the reality of their cash position, break down the two main product segments, and analyze management's commentary on these new commercial pipelines.
Right. And we also have to look at the very real manufacturing execution risks sitting between, today and their 2027 revenue targets.
For sure. So, looking under the hood of that $8.5 million headline net loss is really the first step to understanding why the stock showed such resilient intraday strength.
You have to separate the actual cash leaving the building from, the accounting artifacts on the income statement?
Right, because when you strip it down, the actual Q2 net operating expenses were only $4.1 million. And that figure even includes about $800,000 in reimbursements from their joint venture with GE Vernova.
So the real drag on that EPS miss, the reason the loss looks so much wider than the consensus 8 cents, was driven pretty much entirely by non-cash hits.
Yeah, totally.
Oh.
They took a $5.1 million non-cash loss tied to increases in the fair value of earn-out and vesting share liabilities.
Which is wild, because when a company's stock price is as volatile as AirJoule's, the estimated future cost of those earn-out shares just fluctuates wildly.
Exactly. And accounting rules basically force them to record those changes as a loss on the income statement, even though not a single actual dollar moved out of the corporate checking account.
It's an accounting phantom. On top of that, they recorded a $2.5 million non-cash equity loss from their investment in the AirJoule joint venture itself.
Right. So institutional investors, they saw the 12-cent loss, they stripped out the $7.6 million in non-cash accounting adjustments, and they realized the actual operational cash burn is exactly where it needs to be.
Because gross and net margins are effectively 0% right now. The company is strictly in the deployment and pilot validation phase.
So the entire fundamental focus shifts to balance sheet health and the liquidity runway. Yeah. And that balance sheet is arguably their strongest near-term asset.
Mm-hmm. They ended the second quarter with $41.4 million in corporate cash. Zero debt.
Zero debt is huge here. And when you combine that with the joint venture's cash, total liquidity sits at about $43 million. Management projected on the call that this specific liquidity profile will fully fund operations and planned commercial deployments well into 2028.
Without needing to issue debt or dilute shareholders further. But, I look at that cash position and I see a classic biotech runway model.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. Like in biotech, a startup will burn massive amounts of cash to get through phase 3 clinical trials, navigating what they call the valley of death.
Yeah, racing against the clock for FDA approval before the bank account hits zero.
Exactly. And for a hardware startup like AirJoule, they're in their own valley of death between pilot validation and, scaled manufacturing. They're raising their cash spend to $28 million this year, with only $43 million in the bank.
It's tight.
They are flying the plane incredibly close to the ground just to reach those 2027 contract manufacturing targets.
But surviving that valley of death requires securing partners who can guarantee massive distribution once the product actually works at scale. And that is exactly what management is spending that increased $28 million budget on.
It's a hard pivot from R&D into securing concrete commercial sales channels.
Right. And the major Q3 catalyst they highlighted was this exclusive sales agreement with Kubota Corporation.
Which is a massive deal. Kubota is this global infrastructure giant. Founded in 1890, operations in over 150 countries.
Yeah. And they signed an exclusive deal for residential developments, specifically in Texas and California, starting with 2 core system deployments in Corpus Christi and Irvine.
But let's break down how this actually works in practice, right? Because they aren't just like bolting a water generator onto the roof of every single house in a subdivision.
No, this is a centralized community infrastructure model.
Okay.
AirJoule provides a central plant system that generates pure distilled potable water from the ambient humidity, and it's paired with water recycling technology for an entire planned multi-home community.
Which creates a massive paradigm shift for real estate developers. Because, Irvine and Corpus Christi were chosen specifically because residential development there is severely constrained by water availability.
Oh, absolutely. If a developer wants to build a 500-home subdivision, but the city denies the municipal water allocation?
That land is essentially undevelopable. It's worthless for housing.
Exactly. But if the developer can bypass the municipal water grid entirely because the community generates its own drinking water, you suddenly unlock hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate value.
It's wild. And they're taking that same centralized concept to an even more extreme climate. Management detailed shipping an AirJoule core system to the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah, for a series of showcase demonstrations at Expo City Dubai.
Right, and they secured an Expo City Green license for this, which grants them direct access to government-led sustainability initiatives in a region where, let's face it, water scarcity is an existential daily reality.
In several Middle Eastern countries, anywhere from 70 to 99% of all drinking water comes from desalination.
Which is incredibly resource intensive.
It's brutal. Pushing seawater through reverse osmosis membranes takes massive amounts of electricity, and it leaves behind this super concentrated, toxic salt brine that just gets dumped back into the ocean, deadening the local marine ecosystem.
But harvesting water directly from the atmosphere bypasses the ocean entirely, providing an alternative source of distributed off-grid water generation in the UAE. That represents a staggering total addressable market.
Huge. So we've got the residential and municipal angles covered with Kubota and the Middle East expansion. But let's talk about the actual hardware driving this.
Yeah, they operate across 2 distinct product segments, Prime and Core, and they address completely different industrial pain points.
Let's start with Prime. That's their large-scale platform. They commissioned their first full-scale 16-chamber Prime system at their Newark, Delaware facility in May.
And that's been operating 24/7, right? Currently tracking toward producing 2,000 liters of water per day.
Right. And the macro context driving the demand for the Prime system is just. It's these unprecedented regulatory tailwinds hitting the data center industry.
Oh man, the data center pauses.
Exactly. New York State just explicitly paused data center permits for any facility over 50 megawatts. Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced a pause on grid-connected data centers to conduct a full audit of their power and water consumption.
And New York Governor Kathy Hochul went on the record basically saying that existing frameworks simply cannot handle the large-scale water use from these facilities. It threatens to drain local aquifers and surface waters.
Because data centers consume millions of gallons of municipal water for evaporative cooling. The servers get incredibly hot, so the facility blows air over them, which makes the air hot.
Right.
Then they use these massive cooling towers where water evaporates into the atmosphere to dump that heat, pulling constantly from the local city water supply.
But AirJoule's Prime system flips this entire dynamic on its head. It is designed to use the low-grade waste heat generated by the data center's own servers to power the sorption process.
Yes. It literally pulls moisture out of the air to generate the water the facility needs to cool itself.
So it cools itself using its own waste heat. How does the tech actually work, though?
Okay, think of their proprietary coated contactor like a highly engineered molecular sponge.
Okay, sponge.
Right. And the coating physically traps water molecules from the ambient air at room temperature. Now, normally, to get that trapped water out of a traditional biscuit material, you have to expend huge amounts of electrical energy to heat it up and force condensation.
Which defeats the purpose of saving energy.
Exactly. But in this close-the-loop system, which is kind of the holy grail, the data center servers are already producing that low-grade heat for free. So AirJoule just routes the hot air off the server racks over the contactor, wringing out the molecular sponge and generating pure water on-site.
Wow. And they're shipping a prime unit to Europe for the Net Zero Innovation Hub for data centers to prove this exact capability, right?
Yeah, and the roster at that hub includes hyperscalers like Google and Microsoft, alongside infrastructure giants like Schneider Electric, Danfoss, and Vertiv.
But okay, you have to challenge the scale of this operation a bit. Regulators in water-constrained markets want proof of a 20 to 100-year guaranteed water supply before they'll issue a commercial building permit.
Sure.
A gigawatt hyperscaler requires millions of gallons. 2,000 liters a day from this Newark pilot is basically a drop in the bucket.
Oh, for sure. And the CEO, Matt Jor, explicitly addressed this gap during the analyst Q&A. He said that 2,000 liters per day is just the validation starting line, just to prove the coated contactor can perform continuously outside of a lab environment.
Right, so it's a proof of concept.
Exactly. The engineering roadmap for the Prime technology points to scaling up to 10,000 or 20,000 liters per day per unit as manufacturing scales. A hyperscaler would simply deploy modular arrays of these units to reach the necessary millions of gallons.
Okay, that makes more sense. Which brings us to the second segment, the Core DH, or dehumidifier system.
Right.
This is currently deployed at GE Vernova's Frontier campus in New York. And while Prime focuses on generating liquid water, Core DH focuses on industrial moisture control. They are targeting a massive installed base of 1.2 million conventional desiccant wheel systems.
And for context on why that matters, conventional desiccant wheel is basically a giant rotating honeycomb coated in silica gel, kind of like those little packets you find in shoeboxes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's used to suck moisture out of industrial air. They rotate slowly. One side absorbs moisture from the factory floor. The other side gets blasted with incredibly hot air to dry the wheel out so it can rotate back.
Sounds extremely inefficient.
It is. It's a bulky, energy-intensive technology that honestly hasn't fundamentally changed in decades.
And AirJoule is focusing specifically on industrial applications like dry storage, advanced manufacturing, anti-corrosion environments, places that need to operate between 30% and 50% relative humidity.
Exactly. By replacing those giant spinning silica wheels with their solid-state coated contactors, they can achieve the exact same humidity control using a fraction of the electricity and physical footprint.
So, I mean, if you're looking at this stock, it is really easy to get caught up in the massive total addressable markets, right? The regulatory tailwinds forcing the hands of hyperscalers, the validation pilots with GE, Vernova, and Kubota.
That sounds great on paper.
But we have to look at the harsh reality of the execution timeline. The primary risk, bluntly stated by management on the call, is the revenue weight.
Yeah, we are not going to see meaningful commercial revenue until 2027.
Right. For the entire remainder of 2026, the joint venture will only recognize what they describe as modest deployment revenue. And a lot can go wrong between a successful custom-built pilot in 2026 and recognizing recurring commercial revenue from mass production in 2027.
The operational hurdles are immense. They are facing severe manufacturing execution risk. By 2027, AirJoule has to complete its design for manufacturing, or DFM, programs.
And DFM is really the crucible for hardware startups.
Oh, it's brutal. A prototype is built by PhDs in a lab using custom machined parts. Design for manufacturing means re-engineering that exact unit so it would be stamped out of cheap sheet metal and commodity compressors on an assembly line.
They have to successfully reduce their bill of materials, proving they can build these units cheaply enough to actually generate a profit margin.
Plus, they have to pass brutal reliability testing. They need to ensure a unit deployed in the humid heat of Corpus Christi performs identically to a unit in the dry heat of Dubai.
Right. And most importantly, they have to finalize partnerships with the global contract manufacturers who actually own those assembly lines. Because most of the physical components of the machines are commodity-like. The core IP, the real magic, is entirely in that proprietary coated contactor.
Exactly. But if they hit any supply chain snags in cost reduction, or if a standard compressor fails during accelerated duty cycle testing, or if contract negotiations with a manufacturer drag out into next winter.
That $43 million cash runway shrinks incredibly fast.
And that extended timeline plus just the sheer difficulty of hardware manufacturing, is exactly why short sellers remain highly engaged with this stock.
Makes sense. When a company is trading on future promises rather than current cash flows, any delay in the commercialization roadmap creates massive downside volatility.
The short sellers are betting that AirJoule will stumble during that transition from custom-built pilot units to mass-produced commercial units.
Which perfectly explains the wild price action we saw around the earnings print. I mean, the stock dumps in after hours because retail traders see an EPS miss and a delay in meaningful revenue.
Right.
Then it surges intraday because institutional capital looks at the data center moratoria in New York and Texas and decides the underlying IP is simply too critical to ignore, despite the execution risk.
You know, we have been completely conditioned over the last 2 years to view the AI and data center boom strictly through the lens of silicon chips, GPUs, and electricity generation.
Yeah, we talk endlessly about power grids and transformers.
But AirJoule's earnings report and the commentary surrounding the regulatory pauses, it reveals that water is actually the ultimate hard physical bottleneck for the future of technological infrastructure.
Because you can build a small modular nuclear reactor to solve your local power problem, right? But if you don't have millions of gallons of water to cool the servers, the local government simply will not let you break ground on the data center.
It is the silent constraint on the entire artificial intelligence build-out. And if artificial intelligence fundamentally requires water to physically exist and scale, then decentralized atmospheric water generation technology essentially becomes an AI derivative play.
Oh, wow.
You aren't just investing in a water company. You are investing in the infrastructure that allows the AI build-out to legally and physically continue in water-stressed geographies.
And if water is the ultimate AI bottleneck, it really makes you wonder about the broader geopolitical implications. I mean, if a single company can pull unlimited water from the air using nothing but the waste heat of a server farm, whoever controls that intellectual property doesn't just control the future of data centers.
No, they control the fundamental resource needed for human and technological expansion in the 21st century.
It's exactly. Keep a very close eye on who ultimately tries to license or acquire AirJoule's patents over the next 24 months, because we are going to continue tracking this path to commercialization closely. Make sure you hit follow on the show so you don't miss our daily, no-nonsense earnings coverage and financial analysis. Keep your portfolio sharp, and we will catch you next time.